I want to start by taking you into a small cave in the middle of the Egyptian desert. The walls are rough, the air is dry, and the heat from the day still sits on the stones. A single candle burns in the center of the room. The flame moves slightly, not because someone touched it, but because the desert wind finds its way through a thin crack in the rock. There is almost nothing else here, just a mat, a water jar, and a wooden cross scratched into the wall. Yet this empty space once carried a level of intensity most of us never face. The monks who lived in places like this weren't running away from life. They came here because the silence forced them to confront every thought they tried to ignore. Out here, there were no distractions, no excuses, and no noise to hide behind. Their real battles were internal, and the desert made them impossible to avoid. They went into the desert to fight demons, and discovered the struggle was inside. Welcome back to Hidden Faith. I'm glad you're here because today's story is one of those moments in history that feels distant, but speaks directly to the lives we're living right now. Before we explore the desert monks of Egypt, I want to start with something simple. Imagine removing every layer of noise around you. No messages, no background chatter, no screens, no endless notifications. Just you, your thoughts, and a space where nothing distracts you from what's happening inside your mind. That's the world these early monks chose. They walked away from busy streets, comfort, and predictable routines, not because they hated society, but because they wanted to understand themselves without interference. The desert wasn't a retreat for them. It was a testing ground. They believed that silence reveals truth, and that solitude forces a person to see what they normally avoid. In this episode, I'm going to guide you through who these monks were, what they practiced, and why their quiet experiments still influence spiritual life and psychology today. When people think about early Christianity, they usually picture churches, bishops, councils, or conflicts with the Roman Empire. But the real shift, the one that quietly reshaped Christian spirituality, began far from cities or institutions. It started in the deserts of Egypt, where ordinary men and women walked into empty landscapes and chose a life that made no sense to the outside world. The mystery is simple to describe, but difficult to understand. Why did thousands of people believe that the path to wisdom, clarity, and spiritual strength required complete solitude and harsh conditions? These monks claimed the desert exposed the mind in a way nothing else could. They reported intense internal struggles, sudden clarity, moments of fear, and episodes they described as fighting demons. To us today, these experiences sound psychological, symbolic, or even metaphorical. But to them, these moments were real battles that determined the direction of their lives. What pulls me into this story is how consistent their reports are. Different monks, living miles apart and speaking different dialects, described the same patterns. Intrusive thoughts, sudden temptations, emotional storms, and long stretches of silence where they confronted themselves with no escape route. It wasn't chaos. They believed these struggles followed a structure, and many of them wrote detailed accounts attempting to map how the human mind behaves when stripped of distraction. So the real mystery isn't whether they fought literal demons. The mystery is why the desert produced such a precise understanding of inner life, and how these insights traveled from a handful of isolated caves into mainstream Christian tradition. By the end of this episode, you'll see why these silent experiments became the foundation for Christian mysticism, why their ideas shaped both Eastern and Western monastic practice, and why modern psychology still recognizes patterns they observed 16 centuries ago. To understand why the desert became the center of Christian mysticism, we need to step into Egypt between the 3rd and 5th centuries. This was a period of transition, tension, and uncertainty. Christianity had survived waves of Roman persecution, and believers were trying to figure out what it meant to live a genuinely committed spiritual life now that the immediate danger was fading. Without the threat of persecution, many Christians felt the faith was becoming too comfortable, too public, and too tied to politics. Egypt was the perfect environment for people searching for a different path. Cities like Alexandria were intellectual powerhouses filled with debates, philosophy, and conflict. Yet only a few days' journey away were deserts so vast and silent that people described them as another world. These landscapes became the testing ground for a new spiritual movement. The story usually begins with Anthony the Great, a young man from a wealthy family who heard a passage from the Gospel instructing believers to give up their possessions. Anthony took it literally, left everything behind, and moved into the desert around 270 CE. His choice was so unusual that rumors spread quickly. People thought he had lost his mind, but others were drawn to the intensity of what he was doing, and soon small groups began forming around him, first near villages, then deeper into isolated valleys. Alongside Anthony, there were other important figures shaping this movement. Pachomius created structured communities where monks lived together under shared rules. Instead of solitary caves, his followers lived in compounds with daily routines, shared work, and organized prayer. This shift marked the birth of communal monasticism, a model that would eventually spread across the Christian world. Another key figure was Macrina, often overlooked but crucial. She guided her brothers, Basil and Gregory, who later built monastic principles that shaped both Eastern and Western Christian traditions. Macrina's influence pushed monasticism toward discipline, clarity, and inner stability. During this period, the desert became a network of spiritual laboratories. Places like Nitria, Scetis, and Kelia turned into loose clusters of hermits and small communities. People went there not to escape life, but to understand it. They believed the desert removed distractions and forced a person to face their thoughts, habits, and fears directly. By the 5th century, thousands had joined the movement. What began as a few isolated experiments became an organized spiritual system that influenced theology, prayer, and ideas about the human mind for centuries. And although these monks lived far from public life, their writings, stories, and personal struggles created a foundation for Christian mysticism that still shapes spiritual practice today. When we imagine monks in the desert, it's easy to picture a single stereotype, a lone figure sitting in silence. But the reality was more complex, and the way these monks organized their lives shaped everything they believed about spiritual growth and mental discipline. There were two main paths. The first was the hermit path. These monks lived alone in caves or small huts spaced far apart. They might see another person only once a week, sometimes even less. Their days were built around silence, manual work, repeated prayer, and long periods of reflection. They believed solitude removed every layer of distraction. Without people, noise, or conversation, they had no choice but to deal with their thoughts directly. The second path was communal monasticism, shaped by Pachomius. These were small villages of monks who lived together under a shared rule. They ate together, worked together, and followed a fixed schedule. It was still strict, but the challenge was different. Instead of managing pure silence, they had to learn patience, humility, and cooperation. Living with others exposed a different kind of inner struggle. Despite these differences, both paths followed similar daily routines. Monks woke before sunrise. The day started with structured prayer, not as a ritual, but as a way to bring the mind into focus. They worked with their hands, weaving baskets, farming, repairing tools, not for income, but to keep themselves grounded and avoid slipping into passivity. They ate simple food, mainly bread, vegetables, and water. Many practiced regular fasting to sharpen discipline and limit dependency on comfort. Sleep was minimal, sometimes broken into short periods to help them stay alert rather than drift into long, unbroken rest. Every part of life was intentional. Silence wasn't emptiness, it was a tool. Repetition wasn't boring, it created stability. Solitude wasn't escape, it revealed the patterns of the mind. And these monks knew isolation came with real challenges. Without distractions, the mind started pulling up buried fears, old memories, unresolved conflicts, and sudden temptations. For many monks, the desert became a mirror that reflected everything they wanted to avoid. Some struggled with boredom so intense it felt physical. Others described waves of loneliness that pushed them close to breaking. Some admitted they wanted to run back to the city just to feel normal again. Yet this was the point. They believed that if you stayed still long enough, you could see your inner life with clarity. and if you understood it, you could begin to reshape it. One concept guided them: stability of place. It meant resisting the urge to run. If a monk felt restless, frustrated, or overwhelmed, the rule was simple: stay where you are. Work through the feeling. Don't escape the moment. They believed growth happened when a person faced discomfort instead of avoiding it. By shaping their lifestyle around silence, routine, and solitude, these monks turned everyday life into a form of training, a discipline designed not to impress anyone, but to transform the mind from within. When ancient writers describe the monks fighting demons, it's easy to imagine something dramatic or supernatural. But when you read their accounts closely, a different picture appears. These monks were describing their inner world with the language they had at the time. What they called demons, we might call intrusive thoughts, emotional impulses, old habits, or sudden waves of fear. The desert didn't create these struggles, it exposed them. No figure explains this better than Evagrius Ponticus, one of the most influential thinkers in early monasticism. Evagrius didn't talk about demons with wings, he talked about thoughts. He identified 8 major patterns of destructive thinking: pride, anger, lust, gluttony, greed, sadness, vanity, and acedia. A deep restlessness or mental fog that made a person want to abandon their path. These thoughts showed up when a monk was tired, hungry, lonely, or frustrated. Evagrius believed the key was not to panic, but to observe the pattern, understand it, and respond with clarity instead of impulse. Athanasius's biography of Anthony the Great gives us another perspective. Anthony described moments when fear hit him out of nowhere, when temptations felt overwhelming, when old memories returned with surprising force. To him, these experiences were real battles. But what stands out is how he responded. He stayed in place, he breathed, he waited for the wave to pass. His approach matches what we now call emotional regulation or cognitive reframing. Anthony wasn't trying to suppress thoughts, he was learning not to let them control him. The monks had a clear idea. If a thought gains power, it's because you feed it. If a thought loses power, it's because you watch it without reacting. Out of this came one of the most important concepts in early Christian psychology: apatheia. Despite how it sounds, it didn't mean apathy or indifference. It meant inner stillness, a mind that remained steady even when emotions moved in every direction. A person in apatheia didn't numb themselves, they simply stopped being pulled around by every impulse. Many monks described a similar pattern. At first, their thoughts felt loud and chaotic. Then, after months or years of discipline, the noise softened. They still had anger, fear, desire, boredom, and restlessness, but these impulses no longer dictated their behavior. Silence taught them that not every thought deserved attention, and not every emotion required a response. Some monks wrote about visions, but again, their descriptions sound psychological. After long stretches of loneliness or fasting, the mind produced images shaped by memory, fear, or desire. Instead of treating these as supernatural signs, seasoned monks saw them as internal reactions. They examined them the way a therapist today might examine dreams or sudden mental images. They didn't chase the vision. They asked, "What does this reveal about my state of mind?" The most revealing idea was their understanding of acedia, the feeling of wanting to quit everything. Modern psychologists describe similar states: burnout, listlessness, or emotional fatigue. The monks recognized it as one of the hardest struggles. They believed the cure wasn't to change locations or seek new stimulation. The cure was stability, staying present, doing simple work, and rebuilding focus through repetition. Their language may sound ancient, but their insights are surprisingly practical. They understood that silence doesn't create problems. It uncovers the problems already waiting inside us. And by paying attention to these inner movements without running from them, they discovered patterns of the mind that modern psychology would name centuries later. When the monks of the Egyptian desert began sharing what they learned, they didn't write long philosophical arguments. Their wisdom came through short, direct statements, quick stories, brief conversations, and simple lines that captured a moment of clarity. These teachings were eventually gathered into a collection known as the Sayings of the Desert Fathers, or the Apophthegmata. It became one of the most influential spiritual texts in Christian history, even though it started as a collection of small, personal memories. The style of these sayings is very practical. A monk asks a question, an elder answers with one sentence. A younger monk feels discouraged. An older monk tells a short story that reveals something about the mind. The wisdom is grounded, not abstract. The point is always to help someone see their own thoughts more clearly. One well-known saying describes a monk who complained that he was constantly distracted. An elder told him, "Do not fight the thoughts directly. Let them come and let them go." Another saying compares the mind to a millstone. It will grind whatever you put into it. If you feed it anger or fear, it will produce more of the same. If you feed it patience and awareness, it produces clarity. The stories also highlight humility as a form of strength. When a monk asked how to achieve peace, the answer was simple. Lower yourself in your own mind, and you will find rest. These brief lines show how the monks turned everyday frustrations into lessons about the self. The texts also include longer pieces from thinkers like Evagrius, who tried to map how thoughts rise, move, and fade. His writing reads almost like an early textbook on cognitive behavior. Macrina, Basil, and Gregory added structure to these ideas, shaping them into practical guidelines for community life. Their work became the backbone of later monastic rules. One important feature of these teachings is their honesty. The monks didn't pretend they reached perfection. They admitted confusion, boredom, anger, and doubt. Their wisdom didn't come from avoiding struggle, but from moving through it with attention and patience. Over time, these scattered sayings and reflections traveled far beyond the desert. They shaped the way Christians prayed, meditated, and understood the mind. And even though they were written 16 centuries ago, many of their insights sound surprisingly familiar to anyone trying to understand their own inner world today. When the desert movement began, no one expected it to reshape global Christianity. These monks weren't trying to start a new institution or create a spiritual brand. They were focused on personal transformation, but their practices were so effective and their insights so clear that their influence spread far beyond Egypt. One of the clearest examples is the development of Hesychasm in Eastern Orthodoxy. This tradition centers on quiet prayer, steady breathing, and the pursuit of inner stillness. The idea that a person could calm the mind through repetition and attention comes directly from the desert monks. Their concept of apatheia, emotional steadiness, became the foundation for this form of prayer. Their influence also shaped Western Christian monasticism. When Basil the Great built his monastic rules, he leaned heavily on the lessons learned in Egypt. The structure of communal work, the balance of prayer and manual labor, and the emphasis on humility all came from desert experiments. Later, monks like Benedict adapted these ideas into guidelines that would shape monasteries across Europe for centuries. What's striking is how far the impact reached. The teachings of Evagrius influenced medieval mystics who tried to understand inner struggle in practical ways. The stories of Anthony and the early hermits inspired generations of spiritual seekers who believed silence could reveal the truth of the mind. Even today, psychologists studying attention, emotional regulation, and resilience can recognize patterns the monks identified long before modern science named them. These monks also challenged the idea that spirituality had to be public or performative. Their lives showed that deep insight often grows in simple routines, patient discipline, and consistent reflection. They demonstrated that inner growth isn't about dramatic experiences, but about steady work over time. And although many of their stories were shaped by the cultural language of their era, the core insights, noticing thoughts, understanding impulses, and developing clarity, remain relevant. Their legacy isn't just in theology or religious history. It's in every practice that values silence, focus, and the slow training of the mind. When I look at the lives of these monks, what stands out isn't the isolation or the extreme decisions they made. It's what the desert revealed about the human mind. For them, the desert wasn't a mysterious symbol or a dramatic backdrop. It was a laboratory, a place where every distraction was removed, leaving only a person and whatever thoughts rose to the surface. The desert forced honesty. If a monk was angry, it showed. If he felt insecure, bored, or restless, there was nothing to hide behind. Silence exposed whatever was already inside, and without constant stimulation, the mind had space to show its real patterns. The monks didn't run from this. They watched it closely. They believed clarity began when a person stopped filling every quiet moment with noise. This is why their insights feel so recognizable today. Most of us live in environments that pull our attention in dozens of directions. We rarely sit long enough with ourselves to notice what's happening internally. The monks went to the desert, not to escape life, but to understand it more directly. They discovered that growth doesn't happen when everything feels comfortable. It happens when the mind is stripped of shortcuts and forced to deal with its real impulses. Their experiences raise a question that still matters. If silence brings truth to the surface, what truths do we avoid by keeping our lives loud? The desert showed them that meaning isn't found by adding more to life, but by removing what hides the mind from itself. And in a world full of constant noise, their lesson is surprisingly simple. Clarity begins when we stop running from quiet. We've walked through a part of history that rarely makes it into mainstream stories, yet its influence is everywhere. The monks of the Egyptian desert didn't build large institutions or write complex doctrines. They chose silence, repetition, and routine because they believed these were the tools that revealed what was happening inside the mind. Their experiments shaped Christian prayer, monastic rules, and ideas about inner struggle for more than 1,000 years. We saw how they lived: simple food, steady work, long hours of quiet, and a commitment to staying in place even when their thoughts pulled them in every direction. We explored their understanding of spiritual warfare, which today reads like an early map of emotional and psychological patterns. We looked at their short teachings, direct, honest, and grounded, and how these sayings traveled far beyond the desert. And we saw how their influence shaped everything from Eastern Hesychasm to Western monastic communities. Their main lesson is clear: when distractions fade, the mind speaks. And when a person listens long enough, they begin to understand themselves in a new way. Thanks for staying with me until the end of this episode. If you found this story helpful or learned something new about the hidden roots of Christian mysticism, go ahead and like the video. It helps more than you think. And if you want to keep following these deep dives into forgotten histories and the ideas that shape them, remember to subscribe to Hidden Faith. Before you go, let me know in the comments, which part of the desert tradition should we explore next?